When you picture Abraham Lincoln, what often comes to mind is, that iconic image of profound sadness, a face etched with what so many people have just assumed was chronic depression. It's really stuck in our collective memory. But what if I told you right off the bat that maybe this common understanding is missing something crucial? That his melancholy wasn't a debilitating illness, but actually maybe a unique source of his incredible strength and political genius.
That's exactly the kind of deeper insight we're going to dig into today. We're basically taking a shortcut to understanding Lincoln's political brilliance, especially how he did something that seems, well, impossible. How he united a nation by bringing his absolute fiercest rivals, guys who openly, scorned him, right into his inner circle.
Yeah, and the source for this whole exploration is just fantastic. It's Doris Kearns Goodwin's celebrated book, Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln. That's our sole focus here.
Right. And our mission really isn't just to recount what happened back then. It's to understand how Lincoln's unique character, shaped by all those early struggles and his amazing strategic mind, how that let him harness the huge talents of these, incredibly ambitious and sometimes openly hostile figures.
It's such a compelling story. It really reveals a lot about effective leadership under, frankly, unimaginable pressure.
So let's start by peeling back the layers on Lincoln himself. Let's go beyond that common idea of just, he was depressed. Doris Kearns Goodwin in Team of Rivals, she makes this really clear distinction. Lincoln had what she calls a melancholy temperament.
Right. Likely imprinted from birth, she suggests.
Exactly. And that's so critical, isn't it? Because it's not the same thing as being completely immobilized by clinical depression.
No, not at all. The book points out he was only truly, floored by despair twice in his early life. Otherwise, even during the absolute darkest days of the Civil War, with the weight of the whole nation on him, he could function at this incredibly high level.
So this melancholy, in Goodwin's view, it could actually be a source of creativity, of achievement, not something that just held him back.
He was almost part of his nature, letting him connect, maybe empathize deeply with a nation that was suffering so much.
Precisely. And this unique temperament was combined with this amazing intellect he basically built himself. Lincoln, famously, had hardly any formal education, maybe less than a year total.
It's wild to think about.
Yeah. Yet, as Goodwin highlights, books became his academy, his college. He literally scoured the countryside for books and read every volume he could lay his hands on. Just imagine that drive, that hunger for knowledge back then.
It really says so much about his inner motivation. He developed what Goodwin calls daunting concentration, phenomenal memory, acute reasoning faculties, and interpretive penetration. He wasn't just memorizing stuff. He was absorbing it, analyzing, thinking deeply.
Right. It makes sense then that he later told a law student, your own resolution to succeed is more important than any other one thing. He didn't just say that, he lived it. Shows that brainpower isn't just about fancy schools.
Definitely lived it. And his early life, wow, it was also marked by just profound loss. That had to shape his resilience, his emotional depth. He lost his biological mother, Nancy Hanks, when he was only 9. Then his sister Sarah in childbirth.
Yeah, leaving him feeling, as one relative put it, kind of alone in the world, you might say.
And then the loss of Anne Rutledge, thought to be his first love. Goodwin calls it a shattering loss. And what makes it even tougher, Goodwin points out, is that Lincoln didn't really have that typical religious belief in an afterlife for comfort.
So that grief was just earthly, heavy. But despite all that hardship, he kept pushing. Arrived in Springfield with, basically, nothing. No place to stay and no money, starting his experiment in law.
These were just personal setbacks. They were like crucibles, right? Forging a leader who would handle immense national pain later on.
Absolutely. And this self-made man, shaped by loss, driven by reading, he had political ambitions surprisingly early, at just 23. Only 6 months after moving to New Salem, he runs for the state legislature.
That's incredible.
And he wrote, every man is said to have his peculiar ambition. I have no other so great as that of being truly esteemed of my fellow men by rendering myself worthy of their esteem. Even then, you see that mix of wanting respect, genuine esteem, tied to public service, not just raw power.
Okay, so while Lincoln's on this slow, steady climb, the whole national political scene is just catching fire. Yeah. Especially over slavery.
Oh, completely volatile. The Republican Party itself, as Goodwin details it, was formed from these strange, discordant, and even hostile elements. Really, the one thing holding them together was stopping slavery from spreading into new territories. It was a coalition built out of necessity, not necessarily shared values and everything else.
Right, and then comes the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854. Goodwin says this was a huge turning point for Lincoln personally.
Huge. It basically allowed new territories to choose slavery, overturning the old Missouri Compromise. Goodwin writes, "It roused him as he had never been before. It convinced him that, unless the North mobilized, free society itself was in peril. It totally changed his political mission, from ambition to, like, a moral crusade."
And this is the backdrop for the emergence of these other political giants, the men who'd become Lincoln's major rivals, and what giants they were. Let's talk about William Henry Seward first. Goodwin tells us he was so certain of receiving the nomination in 1860.
He'd already written his farewell speech to the Senate. Can you imagine?
That's confidence. A seasoned politician, loved his hometown, Auburn, New York, and importantly, Goodwin notes he was comfortable with diverse people. That skill would matter later.
Yeah, but even Seward, Mr. Confidence, had his setbacks. Goodwin talks about a devastating loss in the 1834 governor's race. It really shook him, led in a period of melancholy where he worried his ambition messed up his marriage. But he bounced back, became a huge anti-slavery voice.
He's the one who coined that phrase, the irrepressible conflict, right?
That's him. There are two antagonistical elements of society in America, freedom and slavery. Wasn't just rhetoric. It was nailing the core conflict, tearing the country apart.
Okay, then there was Salmon P. Chase. Goodwin describes him as having this presidential fever.
A consuming passion, she calls it. And it was all tied up with ambition for his really brilliant daughter, Kate. The book says he honestly believed that he owed it to the country to be president. Like, he felt uniquely qualified.
And his character sounds intense. Goodwin mentions this fierce, ingrained rectitude.
Yeah, traced back to childhood. Getting scolded for sledding, seeing a drunk man drown. It gave him this very rigid black and white morality.
But apparently, not so great in person. Socially awkward.
Definitely. Goodwin describes him speaking with hands dangling and head down, a big contrast to his daughter Kate, who is apparently very charming and smoothed things over for him. And Goodwin digs into his 1849 Senate election, too, happened under unusual circumstances involving a deal with Democrats.
So maybe a bit of expediency there.
Kind of cast a shadow, Goodwin says, over his super principled image. It never totally went away. A little chink in the armor.
Interesting. And the third main rival, Edward Bates.
Right. Bates was more conservative, from Missouri. Initially, he really resisted joining what he saw as a purely sectional geographical party. He even turned down the Free Soil nomination earlier, even though he agreed with its true doctrine. He didn't think one issue could hold a national party together.
But the crisis changed things for him, too.
It did. He eventually made his stance clearer in a public letter, but instead of just clarifying, Goodwin says it landed as a clap of thunder from a clear sky. It put him blatantly in the Black Republican camp, and boom, he lost that crucial conservative Southern support he might have had.
So Goodwin paints this picture of these three incredibly powerful, distinct, ambitious men, all aiming for the top spot as 1860 approached. Along comes Lincoln.
Which leads us right into the 1860 Chicago Convention, where Lincoln's nomination happened against the odds. It was really a political masterclass. Seward's campaign, despite seeming like the frontrunner, made mistakes. Goodwin points to poor judgment, especially this growing rift with Horace Greeley.
The newspaper editor. Hugely influential.
Hugely. Greeley felt Seward's managers, especially Thurlow Weed, had ignored his own political ambitions, left him feeling like he just had my garret and my crust. That bitterness really hurt Seward.
Meanwhile, Lincoln's team may be outspent, but they played his image perfectly. The man of the people thing.
Exactly. They pushed the poor schooling, years of poverty, and manual labor narrative, really emphasized he was one of them. And that clicked. Especially in the growing Western states, people there were maybe a bit skeptical of the East Coast elite. They liked someone relatable. It was smart strategy.
And the nomination itself sounds dramatic in the book.
Oh, totally. Goodwin describes the scene at the convention hall, the wigwam. Lincoln's guys supposedly manufactured duplicate tickets to flood the place, created this huge, noisy crowd that just overwhelmed Seward's supporters, helped make Lincoln's nomination seem almost impossible, but it happened. A win for strategy and sheer political energy.
Okay, so he wins the nomination, and then comes maybe the biggest test of his genius, building the cabinet. I mean, the country's falling apart. And he decides to bring his rivals in. Goodwin calls it magnanimity rare in the world of politics.
It really was. He suppressed any, justifiable resentment towards guys who fought him hard. Crittenden, for instance. But especially Seward, Chase, and Bates.
It wasn't just about being nice, though, was it? It was strategy.
Absolutely profound strategy. Goodwin says he was determined to pull these former rivals into his official household, create a compact body. Lincoln knew the crisis needed the absolute best minds, the most experience, even if they were ambitious, opinionated, and had just tried to beat him.
He wanted different viewpoints, maybe. Avoid groupthink.
Precisely. He seemed to believe that serious debate, even clashing ideas, would lead to better decisions, especially then.
But getting them on board wasn't simple, according to Goodwin.
No way. Seward was initially unsure about taking Secretary of State. He still kind of saw himself as the party leader. And his manager, Thurlow Weed, tried to meddle, push back against Chase getting a spot.
And then there was Simon Cameron.
Ah, yes, the powerful Pennsylvania politician. He initially demanded Treasury Secretary, put Lincoln in a real quandary because he'd already decided on Chase, Seward, and Bates for the key roles he wanted them in.
How did Lincoln handle that?
Cameron eventually had to back down. He grudgingly accepted the War Department when he realized Lincoln wasn't going to be dictated to. So right from the start, forming this cabinet was a high-wire act, managing these huge personalities while the nation was literally crumbling.
Yeah, no kidding. And they were immediately thrown into the fire. The Secession Winter, the Fort Sumter crisis.
Lincoln's position was firm, though. Goodwin emphasizes no compromise on the question of extending slavery. He believed pretty starkly, the tug has to come, and better now than any time hereafter. Delaying wouldn't help, in his view.
And Fort Sumter itself, when Major Anderson moved his troops there,
ignited everything, and right away you see the clash in the cabinet. Seward desperately wanted to appease the remaining slave states, keep them in the Union, so he was strongly against resupplying Sumter. Thought it was detestable, thought it would start a war the North wasn't ready for.
This is where Seward really seemed to misunderstand Lincoln at first, right?
Big time. Goodwin highlights how Seward initially thought Lincoln had no conception of his situation. He saw himself as the real power, the one running things.
The actual direction of public affairs, with Lincoln just a figurehead. He even tried to take over foreign policy decisions.
But Lincoln's response? Goodwin calls it unselfish magnanimity. Just astonishing calm. He didn't fire Seward. He patiently but firmly made it clear who was president. Handling Seward's effrontery like that was the central marvel of the whole affair.
Shows his focus on the bigger picture, keeping Seward's talents, even despite the ego clash.
Exactly. Meanwhile, inside the White House, Mary Lincoln was going through her own immense struggles.
The insecurity behind Mary's outlandish behavior, the terrible needs behind the ostentation.
Yeah, her spending was a real issue. Goodwin mentions inflating accounts, even using the infamous manure account for dinner parties. It wasn't just personal, it caused political headaches for Lincoln, added so much stress.
Plus, the impossible situation of having a family fighting for the Confederacy. One full brother, 3 half-brothers, brothers-in-law.
Imagine that pressure. And then the absolute heartbreak of their son Willie dying from typhoid fever. Goodwin describes it as an agonizing period for both of them. Mary was just wrecked, almost wearing herself out with watching over him.
And after Willie died, Mary just plunged deeper into guilt and grief.
Turning to spiritualism, holding seances, even in the White House. Desperately trying to connect with Willie again. It's just heartbreaking. And that grief had to affect Lincoln too, making him maybe even more sensitive to all the suffering across the country.
While all this personal tragedy is happening, Lincoln's also dealing with frustrations on the battlefield. General McClellan.
His slowness drove Lincoln crazy, famous for planning, but hated to actually fight. Goodwin mentions Lincoln's dry wit here, saying McClellan had a special talent for developing a stationary engine.
That's biting, but it highlights a real strategic problem.
Totally. Lincoln eventually just had to give McClellan peremptory orders to move. You see Lincoln, the civilian commander, learning on the job how to manage generals, how to push for action. He was growing into the role, trusting his own judgment more, even against the military pros.
And it's around this time the Emancipation Proclamation starts taking shape.
Yes, but cautiously at first. Goodwin explains Lincoln initially favored a more gradual approach. Compensated emancipation, especially for border states, hoping to deprive the rebels of hope by slowly undermining slavery without causing a massive immediate shock.
But then he shifts to the proclamation itself. The cabinet meeting sounds key.
Very key.
Oh.
He presents the draft, but Goodwin makes it clear. He wasn't asking for advice on whether to do it. He'd already resolved on that. He wanted suggestions on language. Shows his leadership evolving. He listened. Stanton Bates wanted it out immediately. Blair worried about the elections, but the decision was his.
Throughout all this, though, Chase's ambition never really faded, did it? That presidential fever.
Never. Lincoln himself noted Chase had two bad habits: thinking he was indispensable and thinking he ought to be president. That created constant friction.
Goodwin talks about curious series of machinations around his daughter Kate's marriage, using it politically, and offering to resign repeatedly.
Yeah, almost theatrically. Lincoln, showing incredible patience, kept refusing. He knew Chase was valuable at Treasury. But finally, Chase offered it one time too many. Lincoln accepted, and Goodwin says he actually pulled out Chase's previous resignation letters to show how long he'd put up with it.
Wow. Must have been a relief for others in the cabinet.
There was a vague feeling of relief. They were tired of the constant drama, the maneuvering.
Through all these crises, military setbacks, political infighting, personal grief, how did Lincoln keep going? Goodwin points to Seward, interestingly.
Yeah, even during really low points, like what Goodwin calls a sort of political bull run for Lincoln, with public anger and calls to replace him, Lincoln was sustained most of all by his ever-present and companionable Secretary of State, Seward. Seward, who initially misjudged Lincoln so badly, had come to truly respect him and never lost faith that all would be well, became this unlikely pillar of support.
And Lincoln's own inner strength is just remarkable. Goodwin quotes him saying, "He had rather be dead than to live in continual dread of assassination."
But also understanding it was essential that the people know I come among them without fear. Projecting calm, projecting strength was part of the job, essential for a nation terrified and divided.
What an absolutely incredible journey Goodwin takes us on in Team of Rivals. It really shows how Lincoln's genius wasn't just personal integrity, but this amazing political skill.
Yeah, managing those huge egos, those clashing ambitions, his team of rivals was critical to navigating the crisis. He harnessed their talents, even their conflicts, for the greater good.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Especially today when we see so much division, so much emphasis on surrounding yourself only with people who agree with you. What is Lincoln's choice to deliberately bring opposing views, powerful rivals, into his inner circle? Tell us about real strength, about finding unity, maybe, in the unlikeliest places.
It's a profound question. Goodwin's book suggests that maybe the strongest leader isn't the one who demands agreement, but the one who can actually harness the genius, the energy, even of those who once stood against them. There's an unexpected power in that kind of unity, forged right out of rivalry.